Hi, once again, I'm Amy O'Donnell on behalf of Bernina World of Sewing in Raleigh and Wilmington, North Carolina, and welcome to month 3 of our Feathered Friends Quilt Along. This month, we're going to be adding 24 stacked square blocks around our center block that continues to grow. I so enjoy seeing everybody's work and the progress that we're making with this quilt. It's just so amazing to see how creative everybody is. This month's assignment lends itself very much to chain piecing. So you can just kind of feed your fabric through the machine and sew the same thing over and over again, stopping periodically to press and trim and so on and so forth. So this month you're going to get a lot of use if you have one of these Blade Saver thread cutters. That's going to come in super handy. There's also, with the stacked square blocks, we're going to be using our Deb Tucker squared ruler, and we'll show this in the video too today. And it's all these things were also highlighted in our Notions Commotion video earlier before we started the quilt. If you have a turning cutting mat, that's also going to come in handy because these blocks all have to be trimmed a couple of times. And so it's really handy to have that turning cutting mat. The other thing that you're going to be using would be your strip stick, because we're going to be pressing the seams open at the very end when we're piecing them into strips to sew onto the quilt center. So the strip stick also comes in handy. We're going to want to shorten our stitch length because all these blocks are going to be trimmed. So I recommend stitching at a stitch length of 2.0 or maybe a hair less than that, because they're all going to be trimmed and we're going to be pressing seams. And we don't want those stitches coming out. We want them to be extra secure. The other thing you're going to get some use out of if you made one of these is your portable design board. And it's just a piece of core foam with batting glued on it, but it's really handy for carrying your pieces around the sewing room and for laying out your blocks to make sure that the pieces are all in the right position. So let's go ahead and get started. Here's a picture of our center block with our 24 stacked square triangles around the edge. If you notice, the centers of the blocks alternate by color to give it a nice effect. To cut your background fabric, you will need this 27 by 21 piece of fabric, and you will cut that into 48 3 1/4 inch squares. And with your light medium fabric, you will cut it as shown here on the screen. I would recommend making the first cut about 5 inches up from the bottom and then cut accordingly from there. And the same with the dark color. Cut a little over 5 inches up from the bottom and then cut accordingly from there. But you'll need to cut 2.5 and 2 3/4 inch squares from each piece of these fabrics, the light, medium, and the dark. And here we are with our fabrics all cut, laying out. And we will want to take those 2 3/4 inch squares of the dark and the light medium, and we will want to cut those on the diagonal. And we will also want to cut those background pieces on the diagonal. And those are going to be the triangles that go around to make our stacked square blocks. Your 2.5 inch squares are going to be the centers of the blocks. So for each 2.5 inch square, you want to take a contrasting set of triangles and lay them centered on the edge of the square and stitch as shown here. Then press them open with the seams going out away from that center. And you want to lay the another pair of matching triangles onto the block. And you want to stitch those down as shown here in this photo and press again toward the outside. Press the seam going out, and you've got your first set of squares. And now it's time to trim. You'll want to center the block. Pretend that the block is the center of the block, and you want to center it where you see it there among those 4 inch finished block lines. So you want to have the dotted lines on the inner part where the seam allowance would be, where the seam would go to give you your 1/4 inch. And then you trim on 2 sides, and then you turn it and you trim on the other sides. And note that you are trimming to the 4 inch finished block line on that. So that's how you trim that. Take 2 of the background triangles and center them on opposite sides of your square and square block. Sew them in a 1/4 inch seam. Press them with the seam allowances pointed outwards. And here's just another shot of one that's sewn with the seam allowances going outwards. I recommend sewing these outer triangles on with the seams going up facing you so that you don't stitch across the points of your original square. So then you lay your next 2 triangles on and center those and sew them in a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All these are 1/4 inch seam allowances, by the way. This picture shows the stitching from the other side. Like I said, if you stitch from this side, you'll be certain not to cut off the points of your triangle. And here it is with both triangles sewn on, and you can press your seams going out, seam allowances away from that center square. And here we go to trim again. This time we're going to center the square with the 4 inch marks on each corner of the square, as you can see, those 4 inch hatch marks. And sometimes they're a little bit off. I mean, we're all human, we sew different ways, and sometimes those hash marks are a little bit off, so you just want to scooch the ruler so that you split the difference. And here's another one of the ruler on the block with the 4 inch hash marks in each corner of that outer square. And then that tells you perfectly where to trim, and it leaves you with a perfect 1/4 inch seam allowance. And you do your trimming using your turning cutting mat if you have one. And there's another shot of the ruler. We can't get enough of looking at this ruler because I want you to really understand how to use it. And that's why I'm showing you so many, showing it so much in this video. And there's all the trimmings. And now we're ready to stitch them together. We're going to sew them together in 2 strips of 7 and 2 strips of 5, alternating the light and the darker centers. That gives you the effect. You have to make sure that you alternate those. So it's good to lay them out on your portable design board before you do it. And this is mine when I stuck it up on the wall, how it's going to look. I press my seams open, and you sew the short ends on first to the sides and then the long end across the top. Use plenty of pins. Like in last month's border, you may have to ease it a little bit, which is perfectly normal. There's nothing wrong with that, but just put pins in to distribute any excess fabric on either side appropriately. And this is what you get at the end. This beautiful block with these 24 stacked square blocks around it. So I hope the video has been helpful to you, and I look forward to next month when we are going to do the flying geese border. So get ready for some flying geese next month, and have a great month and happy sewing, everybody. Thank you.